When we think of those being oppressed, we usually think of people in child slavery, those in concentration camps, or certain non-domestic workers being abused by their employees. In contrast, there's compassion, where we only think of big heroic acts of kindness. For example, Mother Teresa, who sacrificed her life, experienced famine and violence to help the poor. She's an inspiration to many people, but I've often questioned if showing compassion had to mean putting my life on the line to help those suffering. Another question I've also wondered was, why would people decide to oppress others? The example I've analyzed on why people oppress others was from 2 Kings 3. A while ago, Moab lost in a war, leading them to pay a tribute every year. The tribute was of 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams, which was a great amount. King Mesha of Moab decided to take advantage of Ahab's death and stop paying the tribute towards Israel when a new king came in power. Because he decided to revolt that year, the king of Israel, Joram, decided to wage war upon Moab. From this, I was able to see that people decided to oppress others out of selfishness, and in this case, a desire for wealth. In this example, we could see that they didn't consult with God and straight up assumed that they had the right to oppress Moab, although they didn't. After Joram declared war, Moab was suffering greatly. Even though the people of Moab tried to defend themselves, they weren't strong enough. Their natural resources they had owned had been destroyed by Israel. The Israelites destroyed all their towns, fields, springs, and trees. However, it was clear that God gave specific instructions in Deuteronomy 20:19 to never destroy trees in wars, which they clearly disobeyed. This left Moab as a helpless country, and they were treated unjustly for what they did, which was considered being oppressed. From oppressing Moab, the Israelites didn't gain anything out of it. Instead, they further ruined the relationship between themselves and Moab. Moab lost all their resources, and Israel wasn't able to gain the tributes. So what did I learn from this? I've learned that people may not show compassion and oppress others because they're too weak and vulnerable. They can't defend themselves. And they will oppress others because they want greed, because they're greedy and they want wealth and power. So what happens when people oppress others? They assume that they're right and they steal and kill. But this doesn't benefit anyone, and relationships often get ruined. The second example I've looked at was from 1 Kings 21. Naboth was an innocent man, a follower of God, and he tried to keep the old laws. He believed that God was doing right, and everyone deserved their own piece of land. On the other hand, Ahab was jealous, greedy, and selfish. More than anything, Ahab desired wealth and power. Out of greed, he asked Naboth for his vineyard, but Naboth refused because he was obeying God's laws, that everyone deserved their own land. Therefore, Ahab decided to oppress Naboth. Ahab oppressed Naboth by taking advantage of their position and power. Jezebel wrote a letter knowing that you needed at least 2 victims for a death sentence. Not only did she manipulate the law, she also lied about Naboth cursing the name of Lord and King. This led to them murdering and stealing Naboth's property. This was considered oppression because he used his power in a cruel way. By oppressing Naboth, Ahab was able to gain physical power and wealth, but he wasn't a true follower of the Lord. He received eternal punishment, which was separation from God. Moreover, he received physical punishment. Unfortunately, no one stood up for Naboth because they were all afraid of death. This was because Ahab had abused his power so much to the point where no one would voice out for themselves or they'd be killed. God sent Elijah to tell him his punishment, that dogs would lick his body up. Back in ancient Israel, it was one of the ways to show that you were respected. God would also bring disaster upon his family line, where Jezebel's body would be devoured by dogs at the wall of Jezreel. His family members who died in the city would be eaten by dogs, birds on the countryside. But because he humbled himself, God said that this would happen in his son's days. But despite the fact that he humbled himself, he never repented. From this, I learned that people are afraid to show compassion because they don't want to be held oppressed as well. And people may oppress others because they're greedy and they want wealth and power. When people oppress others, it's usually that they take advantage of their authority. They steal and kill people. When we show oppression to others, God will punish us, both physically or eternally, and people oftentimes regret their decisions. There are many examples of people showing compassion around the world today. One of them is Ariana. She's a fighter for poverty. She first encountered poverty on a Week Without Walls trip in the Philippines. After she graduated, she left for America to become a business consultant, and she realized that she had the ability to pull people out of poverty. She then transferred her business consulting skills to join TechnoServe, an organization that helps people develop a business, such as growing coffee beans or other plants, along with business skills of trade to sustain a life for living for themselves. Many people have different opinions, but in Ariana's case, she thinks that there are two major factors that lead to poverty. The first one being an ignorant government. The government often decides to use the country's money to focus on commercial scale projects, such as tourist attraction sites and their own luxurious wants. For example, the government of Congo uses their money to build fancy things like the government office building and the Justice Palace building, but there are over 64% of the people in poverty according to the 2012 statistics. Where Ariana works, Ethiopia, 85% of the people are rural smallholder farmers, and the government is aware of that, but he doesn't want to fund visible projects to help them because it reflects his irresponsibility. Here are the second factor, and we only have a certain degree of sympathy for people. We often come up with excuses to not help them, such as I'm busy or I don't know how to spend their money. There are also times when we are selfish and we want to spend our time and money for our own desires, such as holidays, foods, and devices. This isn't wrong, but God gave us wealth because He wanted us to share with those so that we could share God's love and compassion to those who have less. To abuse our wealth is to oppress people because we aren't using God's gifts for us to share. Instead, we're using it for our own selfish desires. We also ignore them because they don't come in our lives every day. To oppress those in poverty, those who live in poverty will continue to suffer. Even though Ariana isn't working in Haiti, we may use it as an example. Because of poverty, children aren't able to get educated and parents send them away to other families as child slaves, rest effects. The people have inadequate health support and poor health spreads around the country, leading to a high mortality rate where no one benefits. People, like Ariana, help those in poverty develop a skill to sustain themselves for a living. This may take a long time, and it may take a lot of resources. Rescuing one family may have a massive chain effect. Their children will no longer have to suffer from being a slave, but may be able to receive an education. When their neighbor gets sick, they may learn from those who have sacrificed their own desires to help them give a certain amount of money for medical treatment. This is just one example of a chain effect, where love and compassion may spread on a mass scale. Showing compassion upon others, the people living in poverty will be able to find a job to sustain themselves and hopefully for future generations. This will allow them to have an education, proper health care, and shelter. If this cycle of compassion continues, many may be rescued out of poverty. We show compassion because we know it's God's will. It's not something that we do for show. In Proverbs 31:9, it says, "Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy." This teaches us to defend those who are oppressed. In other words, show compassion towards them. We are all created as an equal, where no one, no matter their race, age, popularity, abilities, deserves to be oppressed or treated less than an equal. We are there to defend them, to show compassion towards them. Helping others will certainly be a challenge on a certain level. What Ariana is doing, teaching a person how to plant and trade effectively, costs a lot of time, money, and education. After her hard work, she never knows how a person may spend their money. They may use it on alcohol or drugs. Working overseas, like her in Ethiopia, has also struggled to communicate with their family. In this modern-day example, people decide to oppress others because of irresponsibility or selfishness. And people decide to show compassion because they feel God's call and they have exposure. When people show compassion to others, they may be teaching others how to sustain themselves, and this may take a lot of time, effort, and money to allow others to have a better future. This allows people to realize that God loves us, and hopefully children may be able to receive an education. From this, we definitely hope that the chain of love and compassion may spread. Why would people decide to show compassion towards others? In my case, I've always wanted to help those being oppressed since a young age. This, for me, was probably an influence from my mom, but that may not always be the case. My sister was the influence. Another reason why I might have growing compassion for those around me may be through the exposure that I've received. From service trips like Xiamen and Yangshuo, I've learned that disabled students are pretty complicated. In the little seed that God has planted within my heart, I can show compassion to those who are being oppressed or not as cared for through service projects. Over the summer, I find help within the local community. This is one way of showing compassion. In a way, the people living in poverty, being homeless, or disabled people are oppressed since they may be abandoned or treated less than an equal. By volunteering, I'm showing compassion, which is what God wants. He gave me more and some people less. so that I could reflect His love to those who have less. However, a big challenge is that most organizations require people over a certain age group, usually around 18 or 21. This holds me back from many opportunities, including helping the homeless in Shamshoipo and disabled centers. Another challenge I came across while I was checking out how I may help ethnic minorities was that a lot of them requires people who speak more than several languages. I only know how to speak 3 languages fluently, and language is a big barrier since it takes an immense amount of effort and time to be able to speak another language. Time to go out on the streets every day, but I could definitely raise awareness about the extreme social injustices. For example, the 45.8 million slaves. Another way to show compassion is to speak encouraging words and motivate others. To show compassion doesn't mean that we only show it to the oppressed. We may also show it to those around us. I've heard that God desires for me to motivate others more, and definitely to reach out more to those who are unprivileged, because He gave me so much. I should be like Him, sharing and loving. As a final overview, I think that people show compassion to others because that they think that God has planted a seed in them, and they want to show His love because God gave some people more and some people less, so that the people with more could reflect His love. We oppress others because we are selfish, and we want the best for ourselves and not others. When people oppress others, it means that they take advantage of their position and they decide not to care for the ones that they think are less than them. To show compassion means that we show God's love, and we hope that everyone may have a better future. Lasting effects on showing compassion means that people may come to realize God's love for them, and everyone benefits from that. When we oppress others, no one benefits, and God will judge us. Some obstacles there are our time, efforts, and money. We don't know if it's worth it, but definitely is.